Hey guys, welcome to the Ask a Creator Economist podcast. I'm Ron Jardot. I'm joined here by Thomas Euler and Jonas Rubel.
Hello,
Hey
hello.
there.
Hey guys, so this is episode one of this podcast, and I'm just going to break down what the format is, explain kind of how it's come about, and give you guys a quick little introduction. So, the three of us do work at Liquidity, which is the umbrella company that creates the Unyfy platform. This podcast kind of spawned from that as we saw like a hole and the necessity to kind of answer some of the key questions that we've been seeing a lot of creators ask, whether it's creators that build using Unyfy or whether it's creators that we see on Twitter, on online via blogs. And this is our way to kind of compartmentalize a lot of those questions and gather some of those insights and deliver it to you guys in like a very condensed and insightful way and provide you guys an opportunity to ask us questions. So that is the essential format of this podcast. You ask us questions and we give you answers as pseudo creator economists, kind of a concept that we've created, me and Thomas together. And on that note, I'll pass it to you guys to just give a little bit more of an introduction about yourselves. Thomas, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. So yeah, really happy to starting this particular format. If you've never met me before, so I myself consider myself as a creator, even though not in like one of these super big audience topics. But I've been publishing and writing on the web basically since I was 14 on various issues, but mostly in my later professional life around all things digitization, but with a strong focus also on what nowadays you call the creator economy. And therefore I'm super happy to bring this back. I mean, we started this company that you mentioned and built with Unyfy, a solution that is really there to help and empower creators. And it's a topic that is really near and dear to me, but it's also like a lonely craft, isn't it? Like most creators, they do it from their home. Of course, if you are bigger, then you have managers or agents, and yes, you can connect online with other creators, and that is what many of you out there do. But still, it is not like the profession where you are in an office most of the time, and you have co-workers you can ask, and like a manager or so you can spare ideas with. No, it's really different. So we thought like this podcast format could really be something that is useful to you out there. We also plan, by the way, to bring on guests who might be creators themselves, who might be agents, who might have other roles in the creator economy to answer your questions as well. So look forward to this particular thing. And I guess I guess that is all I have to say at this point. Well, maybe a little shout out and a little give credit, pay dues. That's a format I know and kind of stole, I guess, from the guys from Ask a Cycling Coach podcast, which is a really good format that if you are into cycling and podcasts, you probably heard about this. If not, never mind. But they do this, and it's really cool. And I took some inspiration from them when I started to develop this with Ron. And Jonas, what about you? What do you bring
I
to the
guess we
table
don't
here?
steal ideas, we just follow best practices. Um,
That's exactly the
yeah,
case. Yeah.
Jonas here, Jonas Rubel, as Ron already said, also one of the founders of Liquidity. Here mostly around the product and its technical development over time. I think, I mean, enough said about the podcast format, I believe. I think we can bring something to the table as we talk to not just creators, but also sports entities and athletes, not just in Germany, but also internationally, about their goals in terms of fan engagement, in terms of how they plan to use technology to engage with their communities, to create attractive digital offerings and platforms. So there's a lot of, I think a lot of info that we have that we can share. And looking forward to some of the questions that we will receive from you in the future and discussing those that we have received already.
Yeah, just to kind of put the cherry on the top of that, we work with some pretty cool clients in both the sports industry as well as just like personal brand, and we've kind of seen some really cool and interesting implementations of like audience building, community building, branding. So that's kind of like the just to echo what Jonas said, just gives us a little bit of credibility, or give you guys some trust in us that we've kind of seen a lot and that we can give some insights. And on that note, we're going to open today's episode with a topic that I think is kind of like fleeting to a lot of companies, and it's this concept of brand and branding. And one of the first questions is kind of what opens that topic up. So I'm going to go ahead and read this question out to you guys, and then we can kind of jump in on the concept. So we have Chris from Germany. So Chris from Germany is working on a new music and DJing project. I'm just going to read from his point of view. So, hi, I'm Chris from Germany. I'm working on a new DJ project. Currently, me and my partners are thinking about the brand and how we make it appealing to our audience. Our 3 members already have an audience on SoundCloud. Now we need to create an identity that appeals to them. Can you give us some advice on how we should proceed with developing the new brand? So, Chris from Germany wants to start a music and DJing project with 3 of his buddies. They all already have existing audiences on SoundCloud. How do they kind of develop a brand? How do they leverage themselves into a living, breathing brand? That's, as I said, it's fleeting. It's a tough concept for a lot of companies. How do you create your own brand? And I think on that note, one of the first steps is first defining what even is a brand, or what is branding. And I'll throw it over to you guys first, just to kind of hear your thoughts from like a nondescript, or like, a non-dictionary definition point of view first. So why don't you take it away first, Thomas, and just, what's your idea of what a brand is?
I mean, it's a concept that I've looked into and done some research around back in the days a lot. And the one thing, if you look at what is the origin of brand, the origin of brand is really in the Roman days. People made cutlery or other items, and then they put their name on it. They scratched it into the material and then transported it hundreds and thousands of kilometers away and sold it. And it was like a sign of trust, right? So brand initially started as a person taking their name, putting it on there as a sign of you can trust this. I put my name of it. And then later, of course, like in the mass media era, branding became this concept that companies took away, because there were no longer personal relationships that you could have at this scale with corporations. And so it became the Coca-Cola company, and the brand was the first thing. But then what happened more recently with the advent of social media is that branding, we talk about personal branding a lot, right? And brands became persons became brands, but actually brands were in my mind becoming more what they used to be, namely something that had a relationship component and a trust component around individuals, which is, I guess, also interesting for Chris and his DJ collective here. So to me, a brand, to keep it short, it's like it has to do with reputation, with trust, and it gives people something they can remember, they can think about easily, and that makes you catchy and stand out.
And I
Yeah.
would add to it, maybe even make it a bit more general. As soon as there's like a real story or narrative to it, that's something that makes a brand. Because on the one example I was just thinking about is Apple, obviously a brand, obviously a large company, but at the same time, the iPhone is just as much of a brand by now in and of itself, because the iPhone stands for so much more. It stands for, well, it signals status on the one hand. On the other hand, it comes with things like, you think of the App Store when you think about Apple, when you think of the iPhone, you think about many, you think of nice haptics, high quality products. So basically, one of their products, they basically created a brand from it. And you could even argue that maybe the iPod was the first big brand within the Apple ecosystem, like a sub brand. Thomas, you're laughing. What you laughing about?
No, I'm not laughing about something. Just when I hear Apple, and then I think about, I guess a lot of people would say, hey, Apple has lost its edge as a brand and has lost something once Steve Jobs has died, because Steve Jobs and the Apple brand, they have been quite intertwined, and Steve Jobs was really, really important for this brand. And yes, now it's still Apple and it's still big, but it's now more corporate. It's now more normal in my perception, and I guess I'm not
A
alone in
faceless
this.
brand
And
now.
yeah, a faceless brand, and I think that is something that is much harder to manage and probably maybe even doomed, not Apple specifically, but I guess like this personal relationship, as long as you can have this within brands, it is really something that brand can benefit from.
Maybe also that's
Yeah,
why the switch
Jonas.
to making products the brands.
Jonas, I think that's a super good point. It's kind of like a product driven branding with Apple. I mean, what was Apple before the iPhone? You know, I mean, the iPod Nano and those things were cool. Those were cool consumer, gadgets, cool consumer products, but they didn't quite have that allure yet. Where like, if you didn't have that, you're lame. Because back then, I don't know if you remember like the Motorola Razr
Of course I do.
and like yeah, like if you didn't have one of those, like get the fuck out. Like you're not in our group. And yeah, like the iPod Nano came, like that became the thing for MP3 players. Like if you didn't have, an iPod, you're not in the club. And then they kind of monopolized like the entire like phone and MP3 player market, and they kind of use that to propel themselves. But yeah, Thomas makes a good point. Like you can say the same thing for Tesla. Like Tesla kind of is Elon Musk. Like
Of course. I
I don't
mean,
know, but
just
yeah,
Yeah,
just
I
just
think
the
definitely.
swings
yeah,
of
So
share price a single tweet of that guy can
yeah,
have is, I think,
I think
enough evidence
so let's bring it back.
to Chris.
yeah.
Let's bring it back to Chris and what his question is. So Ron, what do you think he can take from our points here, and how should he go about this?
Yeah, so from like a prescription point of view, or from like a dictionary definition point of view, I wanted to start by first defining branding from like to try to make it as procedural as possible for him, for our guy Chris. And I want to start with a quote, and this is a quote from Jeff Bezos. He basically says that your personal brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. So I thought that was a pretty interesting take on brand. Um, and I don't want to make this boring. I don't want to bore you guys, but I first want to just like break down like the fundamentals of what a brand is. It's a combination of visuals, tone, what customers say about you, and your content, like your actual presence online. So it's like it's like a four category type of thing. And the importance of brand, I think, is like, again, as I said, something that's fleeting, something that a lot of companies struggle with. I mean, we think about things like Nike, like Apple, like Tesla. These are like the obvious brands, right? These are, as Thomas mentioned, like people driven brands. And without the people, the brand starts to fade away. Now there are some other companies who have done a fantastic job at creating a brand without like a person at the helm. So this is like product driven brand or content driven brand. And moving along, we have examples like Wendy's. I don't know if you guys know Wendy's. Their Twitter. I mean, Wendy's doesn't even exist in Europe, I think, but it's basically a fast food restaurant. They kind of were one of the first companies to start this, like, for lack of a better term, shit posting strategy on Twitter. Their strategy was essentially to talk shit, like joke with people who are tweeting at them, to kind of be trolly online. So that represents like one pillar of brand, which is like tone. So nothing about Wendy's really changed. They didn't start doing SEO content or blog content. They didn't become an expert in one particular vertical within fast food. They just built a brand through tone, and it's faceless. It's a faceless Wendy's account. You don't know who's working behind the scenes. So that's one version. Um, but essentially, brand, as I mentioned, it's like this combination of developing like a value proposition to your customers. So we'll take Chris specifically. Chris wants to engage with music fans, people that are already a fan of his music. Now, what I would suggest doing, like off rip, is you have three music founders or three founders within your group. You guys need to establish yourselves as like a trio. Establish yourselves as the face of this company. Like your users or your customers, your fans need to associate this new enterprise that you guys launch with the three of you. I think that's like the best place to start. Thomas, did you have something on that?
No, I fully agree. I think like especially in yeah, this new digital creator economy, the most successful brands really leverage that persons can scale, because the way I like to put it is people are interested in people first and foremost, and brands are just an abstraction of this, which can work. But if you have the people, you will see many digital brands, like the founder Twitter account has more followers than the brand itself. And I think this could happen here uh, as well easily. So I think definitely use this. Use yourselves and make yourselves a core part of the brand. That doesn't mean you don't need a cool name and you don't need a cool logo and all that corporate identity or DJing collective identity thing. I mean, it's a shame that Chris doesn't give a bit more information on what music genre he's in. Probably it's very different between a classical music DJ, I don't know if that exists, or like a funk music and a EDM music and like a hard style DJ. Probably the identity, the visual thing will be quite different and the tone will be very different. But still, relationship is something that people in music fans crave. That is one
Yeah.
of the things why you go to parties, right? It's about relationships. It's about this collective feeling, and I guess that is something you can really put into your brand. But also don't probably overthink the logo part and the naming part of it, but think more about like how can you become a hub for your community and to have this as an integral part of your brand.
Well, I think the perfect example or the perfect like parallel that I can draw is Dylan Francis. He's a super popular, EDM DJ, and he's been able to build a pretty extensive brand and a very popular brand by kind of being this jokester online. So he would do a lot of content about Dylan Francis, and he'd post just a lot of like funny stuff, funny videos. So he's been able to kind of solidify himself as like a top DJ. Now you can argue his music is also really really great. Don't get me wrong. So the product that he creates is great, but he's solidified himself as a mainstay in the EDM arena, at least the mainstream EDM arena, by creating this very like very particular brand online. So he is like the face of the Dylan Francis brand, and it echoes what you say, Thomas. Like the number one thing is making yourself present. People want to get to know you and get to know the people behind the music, I think.
and
And
and then
yeah.
I guess the second thing that is quite interesting here in the music context, because you mentioned product. I mean, in the end, what you need for brand is something that differentiates you, that is distinct, your USP, if you will. And in music, what can this mean? I think you can, yeah, there are several ways you can go about it. You can have a very distinct musical selection, for instance, in your sets, play stuff that people love, but also play stuff that surprises them, that takes them into different areas, and that can be what sets you apart. But maybe it's even what sets you apart, something that is not in the kind of music you play or how you play them, but maybe it's how you interact with your community. Maybe what sets you apart is the dancing routine, because you bring a bunch of dancers to your party who set them apart. But to have a shtick, to have something that stands out from all the other people, that should be something that is also part
I
of
mean,
branding. I remember. No, go ahead,
one great
Jonas.
example I could think of that basically defines a music brand. I guess most people are familiar with Boiler Room. And just the way the sets are recorded, like the video is recorded, is very distinctive. It's always like a center shot of the DJ with the crowd in the background. It's set up the other way around as you would usually have a DJ. Usually he would face the crowd. There, the crowd is in his back. And if you see a video of a Boiler Room video, you instantly recognize the style, and you know
Yeah.
what brand produced this, even though the music can be vastly different and the locations vary across cities and events. So that is one great example for like a characteristic that gives you a lot of freedom in the content that you produce, but still makes it very recognizable. probably not the best idea to simply steal that, but maybe there's something similar that you can find, basically a signature move.
So the actual delivery, the actual product itself is differentiated. I think that's an interesting point.
I mean, other examples that come to mind, like there is this guy called Falk Schacht. He is one of the most well-known German hip hop journalists and authors, but he also is a DJ. But I think the reason that he has work as a DJ and does thing has a lot to do with his work in the media. It's similar, like in reggae. There is a famous guy called David Rodigan. He is like by now, I guess, approaching 70, famous BBC host of a reggae dancehall show, still playing the biggest reggae festivals as a selector. And he has a style that is totally unique in how he presents the music as a radio DJ turned selector slash sound system. That's all talk of this genre. Never mind. But it's the media work that sets him apart. And then I remember other parties that I used to go where they had really distinct stage shows, right? Somebody like Seed or Cyan Super Crew, of course, they had good music, but they also had stage performances. Now we are live performance, live acts and not DJs, but the performance around this really captivated the crowd and was also like this good live presence was turned into part of your brand. And that goes back to the quote that you mentioned. It's what people said when they were not in the room. They said, you need to go to this concert or to this show because that is really something that sets you apart. And then it doesn't hurt to have a catchy name and one that maybe plays with the stuff that is well known in your genre, right?
Yeah, I mean, another iteration or another like manifestation of like visual branding would be just something as simple as like a logo, right? So your logo is kind of your brand, and in like the music and DJing arena, maybe not as much. But what I would kind of bring into this realm is think of someone like Marshmello, the DJ. Well, like what a differentiated, what a crazy different type of visual branding that he implemented. Do you guys know him? He's this DJ who has like this huge white helmet that looks like a marshmallow.
Nope.
Nope.
Anyway, he became extremely. I mean, his music was good. Uh, I'm sure there are some DJs somewhere who can make better music, but the thing is that he had this super eye-catching element to his entire identity, where you didn't even know what this dude looked like because he would wear this giant white helmet, right? This marshmallow helmet. So
Yeah.
that's like just another example of like visual branding. Like, how do you actually like make it so that your product, whatever you're selling, is like visually stimulating and differentiated? And I think that's a great
And
one.
maybe one thing
And
where I
and
also
then
don't have a
maybe
great example would be using since we're talking about a music project, maybe not just a visual component like a logo, but also an audio component like a jingle. Many brands have perfectionized a jingle where within 1 or 2 seconds, you know exactly which brand this is from. A great German example I
Yeah.
could think of right now is T-Mobile, that have like a very distinct jingle of, I think it's just 3 chords. Maybe this is something that you could also add or implement in your social media game and strategy.
I
That,
mean,
yeah,
even deeper than that, Jonas, is when I think of somebody like Martin Garrix. Again, I'm trying to use as mainstream of people as possible. If you hear a Martin Garrix song, you know within the first like 5 seconds that this is a Martin Garrix song. So it's not just in his intros or his, as you say, his jingle or his logo, but like literally his entire product sounds very like specific. You know, if you do know Martin Garrix. So I think in terms of visual identity, I think that's a good one. But moving along now, kind of getting a little more into the like ethereal of brand, kind of like your background, your and just to give it to you guys, it's creating a story, right? So it's like your why. And I know this is kind of cliche, kind of cringe sometimes. Where like people say, "Oh, you need to have a why. Like, why are you doing the thing you do?" Like, you might just love music. You might just want that dumb lower back tattoo. You might not have a why for the things that you do. But I think creating something that people can relate to and something that people can kind of like remember, like, damn, this is the reason this person or these three guys have grouped together to create this this enterprise, this brand. So whatever your why is, whatever your story is, I think keeping that prominent and verbalizing that or telling that story to your fans is like a great way to get that relatability.
I couldn't agree more. And I do have a follow-up question, because I think there is an aspect we didn't yet talk about so much, and maybe Ron or Jonas, you have some thoughts on this, because Chris also mentions that all three already have like a following on SoundCloud, and so we have no info, but I would assume that they stay within the genre that they are already known for and don't completely switch and do a 180. And if that is true, like what could you recommend as a strategy to get these audiences to follow the new project?
Well, I mean, as simple as letting them know on their individual accounts. Now, I don't know how SoundCloud is today, right? So I assume if they have followers on SoundCloud, they also distribute their music on other social platforms, maybe something with slightly better direct to consumer messaging. So whatever platform that is, maybe it's Twitter, maybe it's YouTube, maybe it's a website. I would recommend that you utilize that, like whatever the best communication stream is with your user, utilize that communication stream and start to broadcast, start to hype up this new project. And more importantly and crucially to this, start to cross promote the other people that you're going to be collaborating with. This could be as simple as the three of you creating one song and each of you publish it on your own SoundCloud with a link to the other artist, right, or to the other two artists. So you start to kind of like tease out and start to slowly integrate this collaboration. Maybe release a video of you guys working on the track together, kind of like the behind the scenes making the track. So like you kind of want to like craft this like genesis story of the three of you, and whether you can do that through like a vlog, through visuals, through social media posts, a podcast, whatever that medium is, you kind of have to create this genesis. That'd be like my initial like first thoughts.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Jonas, you have something to add
Yeah, I
here?
mean, specifically on SoundCloud, most people use it without using the UI so too much. Like you would have a playlist, your set or song is somewhere within, so it's kind of hard to, like, I don't know. The description will probably not give you too much, even though you should still use it. And you probably also don't want to do a little like vocal announcement towards the end, because that's also distracting and some people might kick it out of their playlist for that. So yeah, SoundCloud
Yeah,
is a bit tricky, and also I'm not the biggest SoundCloud user, so here I'm a bit of, yeah, I'm blanking here.
yeah,
No, it's been quite some time there. I mean, there is like this entire reposting culture. So of course you can repost everything from the new projects account on your accounts. And I also thought you said maybe it disturbs people, Jonas, but still the idea of having some announcement, some sound branding, maybe throw it together. No, if you like in rap or in dancehall, many DJs have like their name in spoken, like, or producers have it, right? This is a XYZ production, XYZ mixtape. So I have a catchy element that is part of your sound, but also put it when you repost it so that all your fans on your current channels get accustomed to the new brand, hear the shout outs. Maybe you even do like a brief a 30-second track where you talk to your audience and you tell them, hey, look, this is the new thing, come follow this account where we do our new shit. Thank you so much. Because like you say, many people don't look at the UI of the track, but they are listening to it. But if you talk to them directly, it will definitely take them by surprise. It's not what they are used to, and then they could do this. Let's probably end, unless you have other points that you wanted to touch upon on a conceptual level, more on a few practical tips for Chris and his crew, because I believe most people who are starting a DJ collective probably don't have huge budgets to invest into, especially the design part of branding. So all the other stuff we talked about is probably something creative is enough, but not everybody is a designer. So if you have cool contacts to designers, and many people in the music world do, so then you're taken care of perfect. If not, what else can you do if you want to do it really from the ground up? So one thing I would throw in there, or three tools I would throw in there. There are now several AI logo creators that you can use. I don't want to single out any specifically because I haven't played with all of them, but they can do really okay jobs. Then and another AI tool, maybe Jonas, you have some thoughts on that one, how you could use it in this context, is Midjourney. Midjourney creates visuals based on prompts, all works within
Yeah,
Discord.
no
And
need
then
to
there
do
is
a
Figma.
dedicated logo. Yeah, logo AI tool. The
I
general
literally created.
generative image things, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, to name two, should
Yeah.
serve you well. And I've recently come across one that spits out something that you can import into Figma and can then edit. Unfortunately, I don't have the name at hand, but maybe if I find it quickly afterwards, we can put it in the show notes.
I mean, I
And
literally
maybe
created the art for this podcast using Midjourney. Just made a
cool.
couple of tweaks. Used Canva, which if you have Figma, use Figma. Whatever you have, whatever basic design
And
tool you
make
have.
sure if you use
Yeah.
Midjourney to get the basic subscription, because that includes commercial rights. Otherwise, commercial rights are not covered.
Yep.
Very good point. So anything else we have to say to Chris and Co?
No, I just think from like a logo point of view, you guys are each three individual brands at the moment, and if you don't want to spend a lot of money creating new design elements, it could be something as simple as like the three of you take your existing logos and you wash over like an orange hue over it, or an orange background, where it's kind of hinting like, hey, there's a collab going on soon or something. You add some visual element to your already existing logo that hints at a future collaboration. That's like a really cheap way. And then when you actually do launch your own little collective, that's when you do some of the things that we're saying,
Also,
Yeah.
make sure to drop us our SoundCloud links, guys, next time
Yeah.
you send
Yeah,
us a message.
do
This could be
this.
folk music.
No,
Could
for
be
sure.
folk music. Could be poetry, slam poetry.
Cool. So probably the right time now that we got through Chris' question to tell the people, if you have a question that you would like us to answer, to discuss on here, how you can do it. We actually set up a landing page. It's on unyfy.io/ask a creator economist, and there you can just ask your questions, submit them, and then we will try to answer as many of your questions as possible. For now, the early ones, you have a higher chance of getting answered, and hopefully in the future we will have to be a bit more selective. But for now, keep them coming, and we are looking forward to hearing from all of you out there.
Thanks for that. You can also do unyfy.io/podcast. That'll also work. And on that note, let's hop over now to the next question. And it's looks like there's no name attached, but here's the question. Hi, I heard that you'd be starting the new podcast. Curious to see how it'll go. Here's my question for you. Is there a future for social tokens, or creator tokens as you guys call them? To me, it pretty much feels as if now everything is about NFTs, and I don't know any social token project that really took off. Even now even Rally, the poster child of the field, has failed. That's an interesting question. Just to give a little bit of quick background, Rally is a company that kind of works in a similar space as us, slightly different. But they essentially work with creators and influencers. They let them launch their own creator token. Fans can then purchase this token and share in some of the success or failure of those creators. So it's kind of like a crowdfunding, crowdsourcing type of project. Um, Very much funded, very much popular, company out of, I believe, San Francisco. And they recently went bankrupt. They recently failed because of I imagine the costs, the bear market, all of those things were too much pressure for them to handle, and it seems they failed. So essentially, this question is bringing up the idea of social tokens and I guess the potential angst that a lot of people have around NFTs and tokens. And yeah, is there a future in social tokens or creator tokens, as we call them? I'm going to let Jonas answer this first, as Jonas is our lead product man and the lead blockchain guy that we have
Still,
here.
I don't have a crystal ball. But here's my shot at it. I think creator tokens are certainly not that per se, but I think it has shown that a tradable token that has some monetary value to it is not really, or is something that works in very limited different contexts, and just a few. Maybe big brands are the ones that can leverage this best. And here I keep thinking that a mechanism that is most closely to something to a loyalty system still works for some larger brands, can be personal brands, can be umbrella brands, in the sense that in the end you want to reward loyal fans, or you want to have a way to know which fans are very loyal fans, and it feels nice for them if they get something back in return. And a creator token is something that is a very good metric for measuring engagement, interaction, all of this, basically the support that they give you. And if you in turn then basically can offer your fans something for these tokens, I don't know, you've collected 100 tokens, you can get a signed whatever, or you can get a concert ticket, or you can get some access to an exclusive track that you recorded because you also have a DJ project. I think these are contexts where a creator token can certainly work, and like a social token. Um, but the idea that this should have a price attached and that this is a tradable asset where you want to speculate on fluctuating prices, I think this is something where I'm a bit bearish about.
Yeah, I mean, our company kind of started with that thesis, right? Like, let's not create another crypto project, another thing where people can just throw money into and hope that, they land on the moon. And I think what a social token does is it provides a gamified way for fans to show appreciation to you and to each other, right? And it feels a little more gamified. Now you can essentially enable Stripe and say, hey, people can send $1 to each other. Then now you introduce fees, and now you introduce kind of like, okay, I'm now paying money. This doesn't feel like a social experience. This feels like it's just a transaction. So what tokens does is it kind of like gamifies the entire experience, and you can even make the tokens, not purchasable, just earnable. And I think that's what, just to kind of piggyback what you said, Jonas, like the speculative nature of tokens, it makes it so that the market conditions just can fuck your entire business up, and as we saw with a lot of these companies. So to answer this person's questions, like, and I think Thomas would probably agree. I'll pass it to you right now, Thomas, really quick. Yeah, like make something that's a gamified experience that fans can interact with. And I think that gives fans something where it feels like it's a two-way street. It feels like it's not just them purchasing into some type of investment vehicle.
No, that's for sure. But I would almost zoom out a bit or take a step back, because I'm not even sure that everybody who is in the creator economy and create stuff has even heard about the notion of social tokens or creator tokens. And that is not too bad. And I don't think there is a answer that everybody would agree to, because it's not something where we have a clear definition yet. And you just saw out in this world that's called Web3, where of course our company comes from and is active in, and several others, and several creators have had some touch point with it, mostly around NFTs, others also about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and so on, but many not at all. So what is a social token, or what we call a creator token? I think in the case of Rally, their hypothesis was more like, hey, you are a creator, you can issue your own digital currency, and then people buy it. And like you said, Ron, they can trade it and speculate on it. And that was the idea of the product. And then with these, you can also get maybe something from the artist, from the creator that you supported. And if you ever visited the website, now sadly they are gone, but I always said one criticism of their approach, and that was it felt super crypto-y and speculative. Like you visited the website and there was the picture and the name of a creator and then how much USD his coin was now and how much it traded. And I don't know that fans of most creators want this. I mean, if you're specifically like into trading and investing and also a bit into art and into Web3, it's probably cool. But I always assumed that that is not something that will catch the majority of music fans, if we stay with Chris from earlier, or fans of writers and so on, because that is probably not what you want to do. And so compare it to our product, and let's be honest, of course, we have a biased opinion here, but our hypothesis is very different. It's like what you said, Ron, right? Have tokens as a mechanism in your community and tokens that can be earned. Yes, you can also sell them a bit like an in-game currency, which many people nowadays do, right? They spend on digital currency in games and other environments where they want to do stuff, but just to do stuff in this environment. And if you build what I would classify as your creatorverse, right? The digital experience throughout the stuff that you do. Like going back to Chris once again from the former question, like if they are DJs, then probably they have a place where they interact with their community. Probably they release mixtapes in a place and do other stuff. And then in this world, they can make tokens useful, and they can also say, hey, look, if you listen to our mixtapes, if you comment on our mixtape, you earn a few tokens, but then you can use them to unlock an exclusive mix, and so on and so forth. So I think that is our take on a creator token. And I would say the latter part, if it is a tool, something that feels native, especially to a generation that grew up with games and so on, that is certainly not dead. But this way of rally where you have to invest into artists, there might be an audience for this, but I don't know that it is really something that takes off with a fan mainstream audience.
Maybe a little sidetrack that is somewhat related to this topic still. I recently started using Duolingo, which is, as most of you know, an app where you can learn languages. And what I didn't know when I started, but I looked into it a bit, Duolingo is massive. They have like close to 600 million users. They have, I think, more than 2 million users that have a current streak above 365 days. So they have more than 2 million users that over the past year have used this app every single day. So the stickiness is massive. And I experienced this myself, and I just came across a newsletter, I think it was yesterday or the day before, and it's called lennysnewsletter.com, and there's an article by Jorge Matzal, hope I pronounced this correctly, former CPO of Duolingo, and he describes in great detail their gamification mechanics and how they struggled with new user growth and then basically doubled down on gamification, and obviously the points that you collect and the leaderboard that these points that you collect are based on was one of the big mechanics that drove user engagement. And this kind of ties back to a creator token or a social token that you can collect that might give you some benefits in this ecosystem of this creator, might give you some access, shouldn't probably be too competitive because you kind of want to like unite all your fans and not really make a big competition out of who likes you most. But still, like there's some great insights, and I would recommend everybody that might be interested to give this article a read.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you say that, Jonas. I think Duolingo has probably done the best job I've ever seen an app do at like trying to maintain user retention.
I have a
I
I have a
think it's crazy. Like
42-day streak now. I don't think
yeah,
there's
and
barely any app besides Twitter and my Google Calendar and Gmail where I would come close.
but is there I'm trying to
WhatsApp.
remember. Is there a mechanism in the app where it asks you like how many days do you think you could
No, it
streak,
doesn't ask
and
you.
based on which one you select?
No,
Oh, okay.
the only thing it asks you, I mean, it asks you many things, but you can set daily goals, like how many minutes per day do you want to
Okay.
do. But that might actually be a cool idea. Like how long do you think you can stick with us in
Yeah,
a
it's
row?
like challenge yourself. If you hit the 10 days that you say you're gonna hit, you get
Yeah.
in-game points or something. I don't know. But yeah, that's super. But I think just to spontaneously linger on the concept of stickiness, because I think from like a branding point of view, stickiness is a pretty huge thing that if you could pull off well. So what is stickiness, right? Stickiness is like, do you have a product or do you have a brand that users feel the need to interact with on like a daily basis or as often as possible, right? So let's say you're a musician. Let's say you're the Arctic Monkeys. Let's say you're the Red Hot Chili Peppers. You release an album once a year. You tour for that album. Users will purchase your album and listen to it, or they might not. They might just go to the concert. They might listen to it every now and then on Spotify. The stickiness of such a product like that is limited to just when the user wants to consume your music. That's it. Red Hot Chili Peppers don't have any other engagement with their fans otherwise. I mean, maybe they do. I'm just using them as an example. So, like, how do you as a brand, and I think I'm going to bring this back to like Wendy's and to Morning Brew, some of these brands who have been super successful on Twitter, where their product is Wendy's. It's burgers, fries, soda. If a fan or if a person doesn't want burgers, fries, and soda, they're not going to purchase your product. But Wendy's has been able to create this brand where I want to stick around for the Wendy's Twitter. The other 6 days a week when I don't go get a burger and fries, I follow them on Twitter and I want to engage with their brand. And that's eyeballs. That's more sponsorship dollars. So I think this idea of stickiness, where it's like, can you create some supplemental part of your business that forces users to continue interacting with your brand when you're not selling or creating whatever the product is that you create? I think that's interesting. That's super important.
I think that is very important, and I think maybe not every artist can relate to this, right? And not every creator, because like if you are a band, probably you only want to talk with and through your music. And if you are the type of band that only releases an album every 5 years, then maybe you want to do this. Maybe some people would argue, you cannot do this successfully nowadays, you need to be in constant touch. Other people would say otherwise. So that's probably there's not a one size fits all answer, but definitely it's a question to think about. And
Yeah.
social tokens, creator tokens can be really helpful in this respect. But also something that is really cool about Web3 is that as an act who is scarce, you can still build more lasting relationships easily. So something that you can do, for instance, if you know wallet addresses of your users, for instance, because they once received a token from you, you can send them another token at another point in time, maybe on the date of your new song or album release, and trigger them this way. Now, of course, if you have
Reactivation.
reactivation. So even if
Yep.
you have email addresses, then of course you can send them a newsletter, but maybe you end up in the spam folder. But those users
Yep.
who do have wallets, they might use their wallets to various ends and check them out. And so that is a really neat little Web3
Yeah.
specific thing that you can do in this world. I don't know,
I
Jonas,
think
anything to add to this?
Not really, to be honest.
Yeah, I think you underestimate, or not under, but I think it's even more valuable than you say, Thomas. I think just to think about buyer psychology in general, like if you reach out to a user, let's say a past customer, and you reach out to them with an offer, right? So like, hey, why don't you come buy some more of my shawarmas or my kebabs, whatever I'm selling? So the buyer psychology, the user's instinct is to be like, I'm not really in the mood for a kebab. I don't really want one of those right now, or a shawarma or whatever. But what if you reach out to the user and you say, hey, I have some free tokens for you, or an NFT, you know? And with that NFT, you get, a 30% discount on a shawarma or something. There's a very special thing that happens in the user's brain when that happens. You're essentially like mind fucking them, because I don't have a better term for it. You're kind of like tricking them into thinking that they're getting something for. It's not really a trick. You are giving them something that hopefully has value, especially if you attach utility and value to those assets. That extends beyond just, hey, here's a discount. So I
Wasn't
think
it one
it's
of
like,
you who recently posted in our Slack this Starbucks NFT
yeah, that
thingy?
was me. Yep.
So tell the story. It's a good example.
Yeah, so Starbucks recently like released these free NFTs. Um, and with the NFTs, they attach some utility to them. And since then, these NFTs have now gone up to be like $1,500 per NFT, even though they started as free giveaways, as like like an airdrop type thing. And so that's like an example where like it was utility driven value, where they did this as kind of just a way to like dip their toes into Web3 and to kind of do something fun for their fans. And through that, through doing it in an honest and direct way, the intrinsic value was then added to these digital assets. So I think that's like somebody doing it super right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
especially if
that
you
kind of just
consider,
echoes that.
especially if you consider the cost that it incurs on Starbucks to hand out a bunch of free coffees. That's like literally nothing, but they get a marketing story out of it. They get happy users that claim one of these, that might even make a profit selling it later on. That certainly wasn't planned beforehand, but still, like something very little, a little expense to you can mean quite a lot to a given user.
Yeah, and if you're like a much more advanced brand and you have your like average user value, drilled down, and your advertising costs, your cost, your acquisition costs for users, if the math makes sense, then why not give away, 10 free coffees if you know that the lifetime value of that user far exceeds that? So yeah, that's just to further drive home that point.
Yeah. So I guess the in a nutshell answer to this unnamed question guy is, yeah, probably it's gonna turn out differently than expected. I would not say they are dead, but also, yeah, NFTs are quite important nowadays, as the Starbucks case shows. So there is a third and I guess last question for today, and I will read it because, Ron, I couldn't imagine anybody better to answer this question, to be honest. Here is Mike writing: I love fantasy football and I'd like to become an analyst, but it seems to me that every fantasy football creator makes the same content. Should I try and do something different or talk about the same and often super popular topics and questions everybody else is talking about? And if the latter, how do I get an audience?
Yeah,
So, what's
so
your take?
so I think like the overall recommendation that I have, and I'll break it down, is niche finding, right? So if you're
But hey,
creating, yeah,
first you should mention that you love fantasy football, and so you
ah,
are well versed to talk about this topic, no?
yeah, so I'm a huge fantasy football fan. I play it religiously. We do like a live draft for me and my buddies meet up, and we do like a drinking event, and we do a live draft. So I'm crazy about fantasy football. I also, kind of dipped my toes or dabbled a little bit in the creation side of fantasy football. Tweeting about fantasy, started a YouTube channel. So I've kind of like went through those trials and tribulations. So I kind of understand, that part of it, and I understand the struggle of trying to create in a potentially saturated market, which, especially if you're like on Twitter, a lot of these markets are already full. Um, and I think like the core takeaway or the core strategy that I would recommend is kind of like niche finding. And I have a couple of examples actually within fantasy that echo this sentiment. But first, let me just define niche finding. So a niche is essentially like a category within a category, or it could be as broad or as narrow as you choose, right? So, for example, finance niche. Within the finance niche, you have like stock investing, right? You have dividend investing, which would go even further down. You have like long-term 30-year dividend investing, which would be even further down that small rabbit hole. So it's essentially like finding a category that you can reside in where it's not as saturated, and that'll give you the opportunity to kind of build out your own brand within that small little niche. So in fantasy football, one guy I can think of, I believe his name is Matt Harmon. He created this. I think he was like an analyst for like a top sports entity already. So it's not like he started from zero, but from that he branched off and he started this. He started this. I don't know if I would call it like a company, but he started this thing where he called it reception perception, and essentially he is like the leader or the number one guy that researches and talks about wide receivers and the stats behind wide receivers specifically. So he has a very specific niche within fantasy football. He became known as like the wide receiver whisperer, right? So anytime anyone needs information on wide receiver cornerback matchups and stuff like that, they know to go to him. And that's just like an example of niche finding. Like he became that guy, and you'll see it all over Twitter now. If you go to Twitter, you'll see guys with like the email marketing whisperer or something, and that's essentially an attempt at somebody trying to establish themselves as like the leader in a particular niche.
Yeah, and I mean, if I think fantasy football, right, it could be by position. You could have it by team. You could maybe have it by conference. I don't know if that makes sense, but there are different ways how to niche. That
I mean, Bill
definitely.
Simmons, right? Thomas, wasn't he kind of like a Boston? He started as like a Boston beat writer.
Yeah, and that
Yeah.
is like definitely part of his shtick, even though he then quickly branched out to national coverage, but always with one foot in the Boston sports scene. That's for sure. And I think that is certainly one very good hint, like find your niche and then in there. But then he also asks, like, should I talk about the same stuff everybody else is talking about, which are the popular topics, or should I go more niche? And I think, of course, there is something to talking about the topics everybody is talking about in various ways. So you could approach this with an SEO mindset and think, so look, if everybody's talking about this, many people are Googling about this, even though I will not maybe be on the first 5, 6 positions, I can still get search traffic to my site by just getting people to find this article because people are looking for it. And another angle that you could take is, hey, I will talk about the topics, but I will reference other creators and I will push back against their opinion, or I will do something that provokes their attention. So ideally, I get into a dialogue and a discussion with them, and that is something that in the end helps you to find followers among their followers who have already shown an interest in the topic. And of course, you can combine this approach of talking about these topics with the approach that you advocated to find your niche. Like you could take a very specific angle on a big debate from the position where you are trusted with your expertise.
Yeah, and I think to go a slightly higher level, you can do that in a couple of ways, right? So to leverage somebody else's audience is like a great growth hack for like an early creator, but you can do that in a couple of ways, right? So like that's where at the beginning of the podcast I mentioned tone, and I've referenced Wendy's, I've referenced Morning Brew. The tone and the delivery and the type of content you deliver matters, right? So you can either entertain, you can inform, you can educate. Like, these are all different strategies, and you can essentially tell yourself from the beginning, like, do I want to be somebody who people come to for like hard data and hard advice on fantasy football, or do I want to be like a pundit? Do I want to be somebody, a Skip Bayless type, who burns his Cowboys jerseys once a year?
And don't forget,
Like,
these are not mutually exclusive. It can be very
yeah,
informative and still be very entertaining at times. Like the Matt
yeah.
Levine Money Stuff newsletter is a good example of this, where he's writing about financial news, which in and of itself is a rather dry and boring topic, but there's a few sentences in between each newsletter that make you spit out your coffee once in a while.
Yeah, I think that's the golden ticket. If you can somehow balance those two things, winner winner chicken dinner.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah,
That's for sure. So I think we answered Mike's question.
yeah,
Probably makes for a good
I
first
guess for
episode, no?
today.
Almost an hour.
I think so. Yeah, I mean it's learning process. This is new for us, so we're going to try to streamline. We're going to try to package things better as we move forward. But I think like a free flowing uh, concept, I think works. Being able to spitball and throw stuff around to each other and see how we can help you with some of our experience and our expertise. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and like the podcast. If you guys did enjoy it, you can find it on all your everywhere that you listen to podcasts. It's also going to be uploaded to YouTube, so you can watch it in video form. And yeah, thanks for joining me, guys. And we'll catch you guys next week.
Talk soon. Thank you so much.
Have a good one.